Ah yes, this topic should be familiar. If you watched my previous video on the AIM-120 AMRAAM, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I owe you an apology, because that video had problems. Not catastrophic problems, not everything I said was wrong problems, but enough sourcing errors and unverified claims presented as fact that it's been sitting uncomfortably in the back of my mind ever since. The kind of thing where someone drops a source in your DMs and you have to go have a quiet lie down. So we're doing it again, baby. Properly this time. The AIM-120 AMRAAM, one of the most famous air-to-air missiles ever built, with a now 35-year service history, more exports than you can shake a wing pilot at, and a reputation that was earned the old-fashioned way, by actually working. First fired in anger over Iraq in 1992 during Operation Southern Watch, downing 6 aircraft with the first 6 shots, earning the earliest iteration of the nickname Slammer. It's been the backbone of Western Beyond Visual Range combat ever since. And if you've spent any time on the warthunder forums recently, you'll know that this missile is also, apparently, the most broken, most egregiously modeled thing Gaijin has ever shipped. According to the forums anyway. And Reddit. And the comment sections of roughly every top tier MASH video posted in the last 2 years. In the last video, I tried to answer that question, and I got some of it right, some of it wrong, and some I forgot to talk about entirely. This time, we're going through the whole family again. A, B, C-5, C-7, and D, with better sources, corrected claims, actually diving into some of the more controversial topics such as maneuverability and seekers, and dismissing a few widespread misconceptions. Where I got something wrong last time, I'll say so directly. Where the evidence is genuinely uncertain, I'll say that too. Maybe the community is right, maybe they're not. Let's actually find out this time. A quick heads up before we start. A significant chunk of what this video covers involves classified propulsion data. That means we're working from a patchwork of official specifications, declassified government documents, and independent engineering analyses. Some rigorous, some less so. Please also note that currently, all active radar homing missile seeker notch resistance in Warthunder is modeled exactly the same, with the minor exception of Mika EM's angle of hat sensitivity. So I won't really comment on that throughout the video, as it is irrelevant to the state of the missile in-game. I also want to give a specific shout out to Macron's spokesman on Discord, who pointed out several of the errors in the original video and provided some genuinely useful documents that directly informed this remake. So, thank you. That's the kind of engagement that actually makes these videos better. Lastly, sources will be listed in the description. With that said, let's get started. The AIM-120A, where it all began, and also where I need to hold my hands up and correct something from the last video. Born from a late 1970s NATO requirement to replace the fundamental flaw of the AIM-7 Sparrow. Namely, that keeping your radar locked on a target for the entire flight of the missile was becoming an increasingly uncomfortable ask in the modern threat environment. AMRAAM fixed that. Fire, guide it part way, go defensive, let the missile handle the rest. It entered service in 1991 after a development program that was, diplomatically speaking, eventful, and promptly changed how beyond visual range combat worked. The B followed in 1994 and changed nothing that you could see. Same airframe, same motor, same dimensions. The only meaningful difference was a reprogrammable guidance unit that didn't require you to physically remove the guidance cards. Treat them as the same missile. Gaijin certainly does. Now, in the previous video, I made a fairly confident claim that Warthunder's A and B were modeled wrong. Specifically, that the boost phase was dramatically too short and the sustained thrust far too high. And I used the phrase, marathon runners pretending to be sprinters. That was a good line, it was also wrong, and I'm retracting it. A 2010 paper published in the Korean Journal of the Korean Society for Aeronautical and Space Sciences, a peer-reviewed academic journal, modeled the AIM-120B for a lethality simulation program. Table 1 of that paper lists the total propellant burn time as 6 to 8 seconds, across the operating temperature range. Warthunder models the A and B with a 1.7 second boost and a 5.3 second sustain, a total of 7 seconds. That sits squarely in the middle of the 6 to 8 second range. Figure 2 shows the thrust profile directly, a short burst of high initial thrust that drops off sharply to a lower sustained level, then cuts off. That shape is consistent with what warthunder models. The same table also lists the control surface deflection angle at plus or minus 15 degrees, as well as the 35G overload, which again matches warthunder exactly. There is an important caveat here. The paper's authors explicitly state that the reference data for aerodynamic and performance validation was security classified, and therefore cannot be cited. So, the thrust profile in Figure 2 is derived from a classified source that we cannot access or verify independently. But, this is a peer-reviewed academic paper from a credentialed aerospace engineering faculty, not a forum post, and its figures are meaningfully more credible than the community engineering estimates I was relying on previously. The honest conclusion is that for the A and B, warthunder appears to be right in the ballpark on both motor duration and the fin authority. The mass is still slightly light against the NAVAIR, or Naval Air Systems Command figure, around 10 kilograms, but that's a relatively minor issue. The sweeping motor criticism from the last video doesn't hold up against this source, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The A and B in warthunder are, as it turns out, fairly reasonable, which makes what comes next even more interesting, because the C-5 is where things get funky. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting, the C-5. The C-series exists because of a door, specifically the F-22's internal weapons bay. The full span fins on the A and B meant you could only fit 4 AMRAAMs internally. The Air Force wanted 6. So, the fins were clipped, reducing the span from around 530mm down to roughly 447mm, and the resulting space savings allowed for a substantially redesigned weapons bay interior. The C-3 appears to simply be a B-frame with the clipped wings, nothing special. The C-4 introduces a new warhead, the WDU-41B, which has a better fragmentation package and a bit more explosive mass compared to the previous WDU-33B. The C-5 is where the series changes come in, bringing with it an electronics overhaul, compressing the guidance into a shorter, more powerful unit. This then allowed for the installation of what is commonly referred to as the +5 motor, named for the 5 extra inches of space freed up by the guidance compression. The WPU-6B boost sustain design that had powered every previous AMRAAM was out, and came the WPU-16B, single stage, 1 continuous burn, no sustain phase. Beyond that, the specific performance characteristics of the motor are classified. So, anything you hear about thrust figures or specific impulse, including what I said in the last video, should be treated with appropriate skepticism. Now, in the last video, I said the C-5 had improved high off-bore sight, or HOBS for short, capability, and I attributed that to the AMRAAM EPIP, or the Enhanced Performance Improvement Package, software upgrade. That was an assumption on my part, and an incorrect one, as there is no primary source stating this. The primary source of the HOBS improvement comes in the form of new servos increasing the maximum fin deflection angle, not software. Looking at this image, a real clipped-wing AMRAAM mounted under an MQ-28A Ghost Bat undergoing testing in Australia, you can see the control fins deflect considerably more compared to the 15 degrees on the A and B that we just confirmed matches warthunder. Now, while I don't have hard numbers for this, I'd hazard that it looks to be around 30 degrees, camera angles accounting. That is a potential doubling of control authority, not a software tweak. A fundamental change in what the airframe is kinetically capable of. Oh, and a quick note about that photo, we know that Australia has previously purchased the A120 C-5, C-7, and D, which we'll get onto in a bit. And while I cannot find exactly which AMRAAM was on this launcher, we can infer that since all 3 share the same motor and body section, all will have the enhanced fin angle limits shown in the photo. And these new servos were not an addition within the electronics enhancements of the C-7 or D-1, but instead it was likely done alongside the motor changes in C-5, although this is more speculation on my part. Running the estimated fin angle changes through StatShark, which admittedly isn't the most reliable source, but it is what I'm working with, C-5's maneuverability in-game would be in the same ballpark as the PL-12 and R-77-1, which is, to put it mildly, not where it currently sits. Right now in warthunder, the C-5 has the same 15-degree fin deflection as the A and B it replaced, which means one of the most significant kinetic improvements of the C-series isn't being modeled at all. So, how does the rest of the warthunder modeling hold up? The physical specifications are actually solid. Mass matches NAVAIR exactly, fuel mass matches available sources to the decimal place, and the burn time sits within the estimated ranges. The single-stage motor architecture is correctly represented. These are genuine points in Gaijin's favor. The fin angle is a different matter altogether though. That's not a classified propulsion figure bird in a simulation paper. It's visible in publicly available photographs of the actual missile. 15 degrees in game versus an observed 30 degrees in reality. That has a direct and measurable effect on what the missile can do in close quarter situations. The C-5 in warthunder gets the fundamentals right in a way that the internet generally doesn't give it credit for. But the one change that most defined it as a more lethal weapon in WVR over the A and B, the fin authority that gives it a genuine maneuverability buff, is absent. Next up is the C-7. This one is fairly straightforward because the primary government source does most of the work for us. The 2004 annual report for the Office of the Director, Operational Test and Evaluation, which will be referred to as the DOT&E 2004 annual report from now on, describes the C-7 as Phase 3 of the new P3I program, and it lists exactly what the slated changes were. New antenna, receiver, and signal processing hardware, smaller electronic components to create room for future growth, software partially rehosted to C++, new algorithms to deal with newly defined Phase 3 threats. The C-7 also features the quadrant target detection device inherited from the C-6, an improved fuse that detonates the warhead at the optimal orientation relative to the target, rather than simply when it gets close enough. Now, there is a claim that circulates fairly persistently online, and I want to address it directly. It is that the C-7 received an upgraded motor over the C-5. It didn't. The DOT&E report lists no motor changes whatsoever. Neil Jennings, AMRAAM's business development director at Raytheon Missile Systems, confirmed on the record that the C-5, C-7, and original D all shared the same rocket motor. The range improvement the C-7 achieved over the C-5 came entirely from the upgraded guidance hardware and software, better antenna geometry, better signal processing, and smarter flight path algorithms extracting more performance from identical propulsion. In warthunder, the C-7 is, propulsion-wise, identical to the C-5, and on that specific point, the game is actually correct. Where it falls short is everywhere the DOT&E report describes as the whole point of the missile. The guidance and seeker improvements that gave it extended range and targeting fidelity over its predecessors are currently missing. And the fin angle issue from the C-5 carries straight through. Still 15 degrees, still wrong. The C-7 in warthunder isn't badly modeled as much as it's incomplete, which at this stage is almost a tradition. And here we are, the AIM-120D, the one that gets people unreasonably angry on the internet. Originally designated the C-8 before the scale of its changes earned it a new letter, the D entered service in 2015 and represented the most capable AMRAAM the US has fielded up to that point. Mention it in any top-tier discussion thread, and someone will appear within 30 seconds to tell you it's a broken shell of its real-life self. So, what actually changed? The headline edition is the two-way data link. Every prior AMRAAM could receive guidance updates from the launch aircraft mid-flight, but the communication went only one way. The D talks back. That enables mid-flight retargeting, handoffs from entirely separate platforms, and, perhaps most importantly, the ability for the launch aircraft to go completely silent after firing. No radar emissions, no indication that anything is inbound. Paired with a GPS-enhanced inertial measurement unit that substantially improves mid-course accuracy at extreme range, it's a tactically different weapon from anything that came before it, even if it looks nearly identical on a stat card. Now, the motor. As previously mentioned, Jennings confirmed that the C-5, C-7, and D all share the same WPU-16B motor. No new propulsion. The range improvement over the C-7 came from the extended battery life powering and enabling the enhanced data link, the GPS guidance, and energy management software that optimizes the flight path to leverage the missile's new hardware. The range increase was described as low double-digit percentages over the C-7, meaningful but not the dramatic leap that tends to get thrown around. So, how does warthunder model it? The propulsion is correctly carried over from the C-5 and C-7, which, as we've just established, is accurate. The GPS-aided guidance gets a partial nod through the addition of GNSS drift elimination. However, the two-way data link, the capability that most defines the D as a generational step forward, is not implemented. What warthunder has is effectively a C-7 with launch angle restrictions removed and GNSS added, wearing a D badge. It's wrong, sure, but it's wrong in a more specific and defensible way than the C-5 situation. The propulsion is right, and some of the guidance improvements are at least partially acknowledged. The community complaints about the D are understandable, but they're often aimed at the wrong things. The motor is fine, it's the data link and guidance upgrades that are absent, and that distinction matters. And finally, the AIM-120 D-3 F3R, which stands for Form, Fit, and Function Refresh. Currently in production as of March 2024, and not yet in warthunder, and almost certainly coming eventually though, given Gaijin's appetite for top-tier editions. So what is it? At its core, it's a hardware refresh that was built around 15 upgraded circuit cards in the guidance section. Several components in the original D had quietly gone out of manufacture entirely, so the F3R is partly a capability upgrade and partly Raytheon ensuring they can actually keep building the thing at scale going forward. The new electronics deliver nearly 4 times the computing power of the pre-F3RD, which enables the SIP-3F software package, optimized specifically for high-end peer adversary threats. You know, the kind of environment where you're up against the PL-15 class missiles and dedicated electronic warfare platforms like the J-16D. The motor also sees an upgrade for the first time since the C-5. Raytheon VP John Norman confirmed on the record that the F3R hardware refresh allowed for a marginally larger motor, though he was emphatic that the propulsion is not the headline story. What actually drove the range increase was the software that teaches the missile to exploit the high altitude and high speed launch profiles of the 5th generation fighters, performance that was theoretically available all along but never previously realized. In late 2024, an F-22 fired an AIM-120 D-3 at Eglin Air Force Base, setting a new record for the longest known AMRAAM shot in history. Raytheon didn't publish the figure, of course they didn't, but spokespeople alluded to journalists that the missile's range is now approaching the minimum target threshold originally set for the AIM-260 JATM, AMRAAM's eventual successor, which sits at around 125 miles. The battery improvements alone, as it turns out, was carrying a significant amount of the range burden all along. What does this mean for warthunder? The honest answer is that it depends entirely on how Gaijin approaches it. The original D finally got its motor right, so there's at least precedent for propulsion accuracy when the answer is publicly confirmed. The D3's motor is less well documented in open sources, which historically hasn't worked in the community's favor. The SIP-3F software improvements face the same problem as the D's data link did. They're genuine capability upgrades that don't map cleanly onto game mechanics, and based on past form, the likelihood of them being meaningfully represented is low. So a preemptive rest in peace for PL-15, R-77M, and Meteor's seeker and guidance capacity seems to be in order. What the D-3 should be, if done correctly, is a missile with incrementally better kinetics and a guidance suite that makes it genuinely dangerous at the edges of its engagement envelope. Whether that translates into anything that the average player can actually notice in a match, well, we'll have this conversation again when it arrives, and based on everything we've covered today, I wouldn't hold my breath. So where does that leave us? The A and B, largely accurate, motor duration, fin authority, and general physical specifications. The Korean aerospace paper and the photographic evidence both support what Gaijin has modeled, and the sweeping criticism from the last video doesn't hold up. I got that wrong, and now it's corrected. The C-5 is a mixed picture. The propulsion architecture is right, the mass is right, and the fuel figures are right. But the fin deflection angle is half of what photographs of the real missile clearly show, and that single omission undermines the entire point of the C-5 as a more capable close-in weapon. The evidence isn't buried in a classified document, it's available in publicly available imagery. That one is hard to defend. The C-7 correctly inherits the C-5's motor, which is accurate. However, everything that actually makes the C-7 the C-7, the guidance hardware, the seeker improvements, the software, doesn't meaningfully show up. The fin angle issues carry straight from the C-5, incomplete rather than wrong, but incomplete in ways that matter most. The D. The motor is correct, GNSS gets a partial acknowledgement, and two-way data link is absent. The community's anger is understandable, but frequently pointed at the wrong things. The propulsion isn't the problem. The D-3 isn't endgame yet, and based on the pattern we've established, tempered expectations are probably wise. Now, the broader point. War Thunder is a game, not a classified weapon simulation. Gaijin cannot access data that doesn't exist in the public domain, and a meaningful amount of what we've discussed today is genuinely uncertain. motor performance figures, engagement envelope details, guidance specifics, etc. We should be honest about the limits of what anyone outside a government contractor can actually verify. But the improvement service on the C-5 and onward isn't a high-level state secret. The motor lineage is confirmed by a named program director in the trade press, the DOT&E report is a public document, the evidence base for several of these complaints is more solid than the form disclosure around them tends to suggest. The AMRAAM in War Thunder isn't a disaster, but for a missile that is central to how top-tier air combat plays out, the gaps that do exist are worth understanding clearly, which is what we've tried to do here, with better sources and fewer confident claims that turned out to be wrong. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, also, I'm not making an R-77 video. Sourcing for this video was hard enough, and there's no way I'm doing that for the R-77.